I watched a lot of video essays this week, and I watched this one. But it was so goddamn good. And the reason for that is because they convinced me that my attitude towards self-diagnosis was wrong and where it was rooted. And I've applied this realization in other parts of my life. In one of them, more specifically, I want to tell you about it. And that's why I fucking love video essays. The self-diagnosis video that I watched, it's over an hour long, so they say more than what I'm about to say. Go watch it. It's really good. Personally, what I took away from that video is how it's easy to find that self-diagnosis is annoying. I think a lot of it comes from, at least they address the fact that self-diagnosis can be annoying. And what they say is essentially that we find it annoying, self-diagnosis, because it delegitimizes an institution, and that institution is used to, has the power and the legitimacy to give people labels in terms of, for example, autism. So when someone calls themselves autistic, or they say they have OCD, or they say, they self-diagnose themselves with whatever, without consulting the legitimate institution, what happens is they're kind of delegitimizing that institution. So if I have a diagnosis from that institution, I feel like they're not, the person who self-diagnoses doesn't comply to the institution that I rely on to give me legitimacy in my label myself. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. And if it doesn't, go watch the goddamn video. Just go watch the video. Okay, and then I'll tell you how it applied in parts of my life. Let me go get a book. It's right there under my table. I finished reading it actually today, and by reading it, and I'm going to be very vulnerable with you by talking to you about my preconceptions and the way I can sometimes be very. I don't think I personally can be sometimes. I don't know if it's toxic, but I think it's good to sometimes revisit your behavior in the way that you think. And a combination of Alexander Avila's video and a book I read today, finished reading yesterday, made me do that. I read this book. It's in French, so you're not going to be able to read it. So you have to take it on me, or trust me. It's called Yogi Stripper, and it's basically the auto fiction, but it's not really fiction, of the different experiences that a stripper has gone through throughout her life. She's in her 30s now. So starting off from her childhood all the way to, today. And she does a lot of drugs. She does a lot of, personally, the sex work never, I'm completely pro sex work, and she's very happy with the sex work she's doing. There seems to be some problematic elements to the sex work that she's doing. But aside from that, it seems the way she describes it at least, seems very liberating and gives her a lot of autonomy. So it was really good for that. The thing that I felt like a bourgeois, like a snobbish bourgeois reading this book, because she goes into a lot of substance abuse and has a lot of problematic boyfriends, which I haven't dealt with substance abuse. I have people in my family who have, but I personally haven't. And you see some behaviors that are very auto-destructive. And the way she writes about it, she's like, "Oh, I'm just doing it for fun. I'm just doing it, to feel good, and it makes me feel good. It makes me work better. It makes me active. It makes me go to the gym. It makes me do that. Blah 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 blah." And in my head, I'm like, this is extremely destructive, and you are going to hit a wall one day. And she basically justifies her intake of drugs, and eventually she's taking more and more drugs. Blah blah blah, and there's a very, very strange satisfaction that I'm not proud of. And I'm opening it up. I'm opening up about it because I think that, a lot of people can fall prey to it, is that when she does hit a wall, you're like, there's the kind of, you don't want her to suffer. But there's also that kind of satisfaction where you're like, I was right. Do you understand what I mean? And then you find yourself to be kind of happy to see someone suffer the consequences of their actions, which is not something we should want. You might say yikes in chat, but I'm sure you've also, okay, Schizoid Lady says, yeah, I feel you. Haha, told you so mentality. It's like you see someone having fun off of drugs and you're like, you shouldn't do that. And there's no way on earth that you should want them to hit a wall, right? You should be thinking, I want them to have fun. And if they can have fun like that for the rest of their lives, good, right? That's good. But part of you is like, I want them to hit a wall so that can confirm how I feel about, how I feel about their behavior. Oh, is there a word for that, Prena? Or are you just writing a German word? I have no idea. What is the wall? Is it real? No, they get addicted to the drugs, and they make really bad decisions because of their addiction. Yeah, but when they do, you feel vindicated. Exactly. It's like some kind of vindication, but it's not good. It's really not good. It's almost Schadenfreude. It's almost, okay, Schadenfreude, it's almost Schadenfreude. I don't know what Schadenfreude is. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Yeah, Oscar says people who do go through substance abuse usually know that it's not right and that they'll one day hit a wall. But she says in the book, like, oh, it's just for fun. Like I can control myself. I'm doing really good. And until she doesn't. Schadenfreude refers more to enjoying suffering, injury in a humorous way, not really in a vindictive way, I think. And it's not just vindictive. The link that I gave it to self-diagnosis is like that kind of feeling that you may have. You feel like you really don't like people who self-diagnose. And then you realize that the problem is not necessarily people who self-diagnose, but it might be you and the way and the reasons why you defend self-diagnosing is because you want to, for example, protect an institution, which gives you legitimacy. So you kind of don't like self-diagnosed people. I'll call them self-diagnosed people because for selfish reasons, for your own sake, for the same reason that, when you see someone and you tell them, like, for example, you say, hey, you should pack a lunch. You should pack a lunch. You should pack a lunch. And the person's like, no, I don't want to pack a lunch. And then they end up being very hungry. And then you're like vindicted. You're like, yes, I'm happy that they're hungry because it means that I was right. It's very selfish because like now the person that you're with is hungry. They're suffering. They're not suffering tremendously, but it's still a form of suffering to have hunger. And you're happy about that, but you shouldn't be. Phenomenologist says, if you feel like that, you should revisit some things. For example, like being happy that the person that you told to eat or to pack a lunch is now hungry and now you're feeling satisfaction. Isn't that normal? Like, it's a weird and toxic feeling, of course, but am I the only one who feels it? That kind of vindication? Do I have to seek therapy? Okay. It's very normal. Okay. Thank you. Whew. Whew. So we can all be assholes and toxic together. Okay, great. Let's justify our bad behavior by all agreeing to it and saying it's normal. Yeah, I feel happy whenever I'm right, but I'm not happy about their suffering. But in order to be right, they need to suffer. That's like the contradiction, the paradox to analyze. And okay.